All right, so you guys wanted to know what the Swiss press is saying about, well, neighborly disputes.
Juicy stuff.
It is, actually. And we found some interesting data. We did a deep dive into some recent market research
Yeah.
from Marketagent.com.
Okay.
And let me tell you, even in the land of cheese and chocolate,
Yeah.
things aren't always so sweet, especially when it comes to those living, right next door.
Right, behind closed doors, yeah. It's fascinating how universal these experiences are.
Isn't it? You would think, right? Switzerland,
Yeah.
everyone's like getting along.
Peaceful.
But the study found that over a quarter of residents have actually experienced some kind of conflict with their neighbors.
Which, I mean, on a global scale, that's not unusual at all.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Proximity, you know, tends to breed, well, maybe not contempt, but definitely some occasional friction, right?
Yeah.
We're social creatures. But we also really crave our own space, our own resources.
Yeah, and when those resources feel threatened,
Yeah.
things can get a little dicey. Speaking of things getting dicey, the number one reason for conflict, according to the study, noise complaints.
Makes total sense, though, when you think about it. Noise is, by its very nature, intrusive, right?
Yeah.
It disrupts our sense of peace, our privacy, whether it's loud music, construction, even just a constantly barking dog.
Yeah.
And, in a place like Switzerland with often very dense urban living,
Right.
those noise issues can just feel amplified.
It's like you're saying, good fences make good neighbors. But even then, sometimes
Sometimes it's not enough.
not enough. Right behind noise, we've got laundry room drama.
Oh, yeah.
Who knew that shared washing machines could be so contentious?
Well, it's all about resource allocation, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, shared laundry facilities, especially in, say, apartment buildings, those become like this prime example of, you've got a finite resource, you've got to manage it carefully.
Right.
And then you throw in things like, different schedules, different cultural norms around laundry practices, different definitions of what clean even means. Right.
Right. And yeah, you've got a recipe for potential conflict.
Yeah, it's like, whose sock is this?
Exactly.
And it's not just noise and laundry. Parking wars and property line disputes also ranked high on the list of neighborly grievances.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, you would almost think it was a sitcom or something.
All right.
Except it sounds like for many, these conflicts create genuine stress.
Absolutely. And the study found that over a third of those who had experienced these conflicts, they found it emotionally burdensome. And interestingly, women reported higher levels of stress than men in these situations.
This opens up a whole other layer of questions. Is that about, different communication styles, societal expectations around these conflicts? I mean, what do you think?
It's probably a combination of factors,
Yeah.
to be honest. I mean, we see this gender difference reflected in broader research on conflict and stress as well. Women are often, I think, unfairly tasked with a greater share of emotional labor, which can lead to feeling overwhelmed, feeling responsible for smoothing over these tensions.
Yeah.
And that takes a toll. Absolutely. And even without those added pressures, conflict, especially when it's ongoing, takes a toll.
It can really impact our mental health, even our physical health, leading to anxiety, sleeplessness, just a diminished sense of well-being.
Yeah.
Which is why it's so important to have healthy coping mechanisms in place, whether that's direct communication, seeking mediation, or just setting some really firm boundaries to protect your own peace of mind.
So how do people deal with these neighborly, dust-ups?
Yeah.
Well, according to the study, there's a fascinating divide in approaches.
Because just as common as the outward conflict is the tendency towards avoidance.
The study found that a large percentage, 43% to be exact,
Wow.
actually try to address things head on, try to talk it out with their neighbors.
Which I like to hear.
Right.
It speaks to the power of communication.
Yeah.
Even amidst conflict, it takes courage, right?
Yeah.
Empathy,
Yeah.
a willingness to try to see the situation from the other person's perspective.
Well,
But it often leads to the most, mutually beneficial outcomes.
Right. Exactly.
When it works.
It's encouraging to see that many people are willing to at least take that first step, right?
Right.
But then there's the other side of the coin. 24% admitted to stewing in silence,
Oh, yeah.
just letting those negative feelings simmer.
See, and that's where things get really interesting, psychologically speaking.
Okay.
Because this conflict avoidance,
Hmm.
it's a very real and well-studied thing.
Hmm.
And while avoiding that direct confrontation might feel easier in the moment,
Yeah.
it can often lead to, well, resentment, misunderstandings,
Yeah.
and often even more heightened tensions down the line.
Like that feeling when you just replay the argument in your head over and over and over, but never actually say anything.
Exactly.
The worst.
And then there's another group,
Yeah.
22% in the study, who opted to involve a third party going straight to the Hausverwaltung, the building management.
So basically calling in the resident referee to settle the score.
Right, like an adult.
Right.
And while that can be super effective
Yeah.
for mediating certain disputes,
Right.
it also, I think, highlights how adversarial these neighborly conflicts can become.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
no longer neighbor versus neighbor.
Oh.
It's each party vying for the support and validation of this external authority.
Right. It's almost like you've got to get someone else on your side so they can say, no, you're right, they're wrong.
Validation.
Yes.
We need that external validation.
And you can see how that could escalate things,
Sure.
even unintentionally.
Absolutely.
But regardless of, people's chosen strategy, this study found this really interesting, tidbit.
Okay, play it on me.
So remember how we said, over a third of the respondents said these conflicts took an emotional toll?
Yeah.
Well, a whopping 80% of them placed the blame for that emotional toll squarely on their neighbors.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah.
It's so interesting how our perceptions shape our realities,
Yeah,
right?
it really is.
It makes you wonder, how many of those neighbors on the other side of that conflict would say the exact same thing about the person pointing the finger?
Right, exactly.
Everybody thinks they're right,
Of course.
that their experience is the objective truth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is why it's a good reminder that there are always multiple sides to every story.
Always.
And sometimes those stories, they get colored by our own biases and interpretations.
Totally.
What one person considers totally reasonable, someone else might find completely unacceptable.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And that's where things get really interesting for me because it makes you think about your own experiences.
Absolutely. We all have our own thresholds, our own sensitivities. What might seem like a minor annoyance to one person
Yeah.
could be a major stressor for someone else.
It's like that old saying, good fences make good neighbors, but maybe it's not just about physical boundaries. Maybe it's about understanding that good is relative.
Exactly. It's about respecting those individual differences, even when they clash with our own preferences.
Right.
And I think that requires a certain degree of self-awareness,
Totally.
a willingness to kind of step back and acknowledge that our perspective, it's
Yeah.
not the only one that matters.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the surprisingly complex world of Swiss neighborly relations,
Right.
it makes you wonder, how do your own experiences stack up?
Yeah. Are you the peacemaker in your building?
Right.
Are you the one who's always trying to find that common ground?
Yeah.
Or do you have your own tale of neighborly woe that could rival even the most intense Swiss cheese dispute?
I love it. Well, we would love for you to reflect on that, This deep dive was sparked by your curiosity.
Yeah.
And we hope it's given you some food for thought.
Sure.
Maybe even a fresh perspective on those everyday interactions that can sometimes make us want to pull our hair out.
Because at the end of the day, whether we're in the heart of Zurich or a bustling city halfway across the world,
Yeah.
These dynamics of shared space and resources, they're something we all navigate.
We do.
And understanding those dynamics with a little dose of empathy and maybe a dash of humor
Always.
can make all the difference.
Couldn't agree more. Until next time, happy neighboring, everyone.